Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Colin Dhillon from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and welcome to one of our webinar series sponsored by KPMG. The title of this webinar is COVID-19 Cybersecurity Implications. It is 2 o'clock. We will give it just a minute to let other people log in, and then we'll get right into it. Thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining the APMA webinar series sponsored by KPMG. The title, COVID-19 Cybersecurity Implications. My name's Colin Dhillon, and a few housekeeping points before we begin. Please do keep your devices on mute. All questions should be typed into the Zoom Q&A section, and do feel free to ask questions per category as we're talking. I will introduce the questions to the panelists as we do that. And the webinar is being recorded and will be made available as usual on the APMA website. The Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association has been representing the auto parts suppliers for over 68 years. Our advocacy and support in regulatory and policy that directly affect the sector now includes support for the digitization of our entire industry, from the vehicle to the factory. The APMA has been leading in initiatives like connecting and autonomous vehicles, Industry 4.0, and cybersecurity, making sure our members and multiple levels of government are fully prepared for what most are calling the largest disruption in the last 50 to 100 years. In 2019, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association founded the Cybersecurity Committee, bringing together some individuals from the automotive sector, blockchain, AI, national security, insurance, and the cyber world. Our objectives: to change the culture when it comes to cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity continues to be of top concern for Canadian automotive parts manufacturers as they accelerate their use of existing systems and leverage new technologies to adapt to distant working environments. Companies have been taking the first steps needed to protect themselves from the short term. However, they will need to keep reevaluating the cyber landscape in order to stay resilient, not just during the restart of this period that we're about to merge into, but for the long term. And today we have three excellent panelists. I will introduce the three panelists and then we will get right into the questions. Dr. Mitra Mirhassani is an associate professor at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Windsor. Her research focuses on hardware security development of methods for the detection of Trojan hardware and high-performance custom-designed artificial intelligence systems. She served as the vice chair for the Women in Engineering Affinity Group, IEEE South, East Michigan, section 2000 in 2014. She is serving as the associate editor of IEEE Access Journal and Neural Network Track chair for the period of 2016 through to 2018. She is IEEE, and I will ask her what the acronym means, Conference Editorial Board Member, and a senior member of IEEE. She also sits on the APMA's Cybersecurity Committee. John Heaton is an experienced IT risk and security transformation leader with over 30 years of experience. He brings over 25 years of pragmatic experience in helping clients to transform their IT risks and security organizations, solutions, and processes to meet the ever-changing regulatory and customer requirements. John brings extensive knowledge in information security risk management, technical security architecture design, cyber maturity assessments, application security, and security compliance. John is a chartered accountant and holds a certified information systems auditor and certified information system security professional designations. John works for the KPMG as a major partner, and he also sits on the APMA Cybersecurity Committee. And third, and our final, is AJ Kahn, the CEO of Cloud-GRC, and also the co-chair of the APMA's Cybersecurity Committee. AJ has over 20 years of experience in governance, risk, and compliance, and 13 years of experience in cybersecurity innovation. And he has worked in places like the Middle East and North America in multiple sectors, including the financial institutions, oil, gas, telecom, government, retail, and the manufacturing sectors. AJ's cyber expertise includes building cyber governance strategies, policies and procedures, payment card security, cloud security, CASB, and automotive security. I welcome all three of you.
Thank you.
So we are going to have a discussion now for just over 55 minutes. Please make sure your mics are not muted. The agenda of today will be to talk about the cybersecurity implications when it comes to cybersecurity in this remote kind of area that we find ourselves. You know, is the current environment going to be the new normal? Corporate devices versus personal devices. You know, what are we doing as companies to make sure that, you know, we are putting in the best practices from a cyber standpoint? Where is your data being stored? Cybercrime, the challenges of securing remote work, and then we will give away some key takeaways as well. So we'll go to the first section. Is the current environment going to be the new norm? And I put this out to all three of you. We are now into, some are into week 6, others are into week 8 from working remotely from home. What do we hear and what do we sense as being deemed to be the new normal? Are we going to be working from home? Do commercial office spaces continue to be filled, or will those be made vacant as we go through? Is it a short period or does this extend? I would like to open that up to all three of you. Feel free to jump in and provide your feedback.
Well, I say yes. It's kind of the signal was, even before the pandemic, was that a lot of larger corporations were moving from a designated office space to the concept of open, larger space whenever, whatever is available, take your seat and work. And this has actually kind of emphasized that the era for having your own cubicle even is kind of a luxury that the larger companies probably don't want to, you know, go through the expenses that are coming, you know, out of this. So yeah, I expect this to be even, you know, from the lessons that we learned, at least from this unwanted practice, this is going to be the new norm. And even if, as I was following some of the medical news, we have to expect these interruptions probably in more severe forms. So I think that the larger corporations are going to, you know, think along the way that in order to reduce the disruptions, reduce the problems that they have in the work environment, to think about the remote working for as much as possible. Some, of course, you can't make them working remote, especially those that are in say certain sectors of manufacturing. But most of the, you know, work seems to be going that way. Stay at home and work efficiently from home.
John, if I was to challenge you on policies, you know, do our current work policies, you know, reflect, you know, the correct things when challenged to work from home? Are we set up the right way from a governance standpoint?
The challenge is, you know, organizations originally, when
when they created their systems and networks, and their policies related to that assumed we had a castle with a moat around it. And so that we just have to keep bad people out. And we just have to control, because everyone's going to sit inside that moat with their own laptop, with a corporate issued laptop on a corporate network, on a corporate system. We then added other solutions. We added cloud, we added third parties. And so we started punching some holes. The problem is that everybody left the castle and is now all working from their home. And so the policies were all designed on the basis of you would use the corporate laptop, the corporate device on a corporate network in a corporate office with a corporate solution. And that world isn't the new environment, right? Look, we're using Zoom. I know that I heard that one company added 1 million plus users in Canada for their solution that allows people to do video and document sharing. 1 million people, right? 12 million globally. So, and the number of people who are probably watching this on their iPad, on their personal computer, not their corporate computer, sitting at their home. Yeah, welcome to my basement, week 8. I think for some people that is the new normal. The challenge will be in the automotive environment, that for people who perhaps do design work, who do back office work, this could be the new normal. But you can't really, build parts. You can't assemble cars. You can't sell them to people sitting in your basement. So for some people, this may be the new normal, but for others, it won't be. And Mitra, to your comment, the idea right now of sharing an open office space with people who I don't know if, they have COVID, they've recovered from COVID. I don't know what their families have. I think most people would say, no, I'm not good with that. I'm not comfortable. And I saw on the news today what Toyota's doing with the level of what they're doing to protect their people so they can open up the factory floor. I think maybe it's the new normal sitting at home, but I don't think it's going to be the new normal for a lot of people in some of our clients.
And I'm glad you bring up Toyota. We just had our kind of quarterly Industrial Revolution 4.0 committee meeting, and Toyota gave a presentation, Toyota Canada, talking about their facilities in Cambridge, Ontario, and how they have reevaluated 5 million square feet to make sure that they try and meet all the best practices when it comes to social distancing. 5 million square feet had to be reevaluated in order for them to start looking at opening up slowly next week. But AJ, if this is the new norm, what does that mean for, not only the employer, because, I think we know some of the implications, and we've heard that numbers and data are being crunched to see if it's actually going to be value add and the right step. But what does it mean for the employee?
Yeah, actually, I think that is the crux of the problem here on why we need governance policies, both for the employee and for the organization. The question is, what is the risk to the employee and the organization? And what are the governance policies which speak to those risks and can mitigate those risks through various controls? So from an employee perspective, is the employee more susceptible to certain cybersecurity incidents while working from home? If there is an incident, is there a cybersecurity incident policy which can actually help the employee in this regard? How does the organization monitor the traffic which is related to the corporate activities, corporate data, corporate security for a remote work environment? There are privacy issues involved over here. So this new normal does bring up a number of challenges, a number of problems which were not foreseen before, and governance policies need to be addressed specifically to those challenges.
I think one of the comments, it was brought up the other day, we had a prep call, I can't remember who mentioned it, but we're all doing this with broadband network capabilities, but what about people who don't have that? Who's paying for that? And that works in the GTA, that works in Southern Ontario. But if you have suppliers and third parties who are outside of that, they may not have those equivalent capabilities.
Well, that bleeds right well into question number 2, which is corporate devices versus personal devices. We've all heard the horror stories of screens and laptops being put under your arms and people running out to their cars. You know, what are the protocols, you know, with regards to, you know, what type of internet connectivity do you have? I live up in Caledon. There are parts of rural Caledon that don't actually have any internet. 8 blackout zones throughout the whole of Caledon as a city. You know, how do you function if you're in those areas? You know, the cost associated, you know, what does it mean? You know, what's the difference now as we're living through this, the difference between a corporate device and a personal device?
One of the challenges that, you know, most of you are sitting, you know, in front of a computer with a screen. You probably have your iPad beside you. You probably have your phone going at the same time. Maybe you're even watching this on your phone. I had one client where people had to come into the office and take desktops home because they didn't have enough laptops. Others where, you know, you bring people on and you say, well, just connect using your personal device. If you don't have, I think, AJ, to your comment, if you don't have a policy in place around the usage of a personal device, what's allowed, what can't be stored, or controls over what those devices and the ability to wipe them if they get lost or the person leaves, then you run the risk that you've lost control of that data, and you've therefore lost control in particular of data that may not be yours, right? It may be the OEM's data, and they may have rules about how that data is protected. And if that ends up on a personal device, really easy, because I email you a file and you save it onto your device, I've now lost control of that, and I may not be following the expectations of my OEM.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, sometimes we usually, I'm working in academia, so sometimes we think that there are a bit of a more relaxed environment in academia. Students have laptops, computers, you know, but we had to put some of our research on hold because the company that we were working, they weren't comfortable with the data being moved from a computer on the office, which we had anti-glare, positioned it properly so the screen doesn't, no one can look at the screen. It wasn't connected to any Wi-Fi or broadband. You couldn't even have a USB in the computer. So none of those measures we couldn't basically ensure the corporate that we can enforce it in someone's basement or house. So some of those projects are actually put on hold till we can find a way for, you know, guaranteeing that security for the company, for their data, to basically, so they keep controlling their information.
And I think that what John was initially saying, that there were so many holes punched into the moat even before the pandemic. So we were using cloud apps, and thousands of them, where we can download and store data on our personal devices. So those holes were already there. Personal devices were already being used in a certain circumstances. And this pandemic has only enhanced and accelerated the requirement for cybersecurity for personal devices. One of the things which I do want to bring up, and I think, Colin, it would lead to your next question, is what you mentioned in my intro, CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. Those devices are already available, which can enable you to secure your personal devices and make sure that no data which is critical to the organization is stored on personal devices.
One other thing about this personal devices is, and I think, Colin, this brings back to your comment about what about the people component, right? You may be now asking people to log in and do work on their personal device. Do the people understand what that means? Do they understand that, you know, once you start logging in and you connect into the mobile device management, that the organization can now wipe your device, including all your pictures of your kids and your dogs, and they can wipe it remotely as and when they see fit. So do people understand the consequences of using their personal device for business, and are they okay with that, and have they agreed to that? And I think that's part of the challenge. If you don't have the policies and you haven't communicated to the people, they may not know the consequences if something happens. Say their house gets broken into and the device is stolen. Well, guess what? It's now going to get wiped. And so all that data is gone.
And to be honest, I don't think a lot of people know that. I know of government agencies that have asked their people working from home to use their personal devices, even though they have a secure VPN that they log into. But the reality is they are using it off a personal device. And the thing that we're kind of alluding to is data, and where is data being stored? You know, cloud versus server, you know, where are you storing your data, you know, personally and also for business, you know, and how do we ensure that organizations' documents and files are not being stored on personal devices? Again, back to, I think, what AJ said about having a governance model and policies in place. You know, and do you know what your customers' regulatory obligations are? I think Mitra kind of alluded to that at the beginning. You know, if you're, we're talking about the automotive sector here, we're talking about global OEMs like General Motors and Toyota. You know, is there an understanding of their regulatory obligations for working on intellectual property files that you are now moving around on personal devices at home using, you know, telecoms, you know, poor bandwidth and without any firewalls? So where is your data being stored and what are the challenges?
There are a number of challenges there. And like I mentioned that we were already using a lot of cloud apps. So the first of all organizations should understand the basic question, where is the data being stored? So how many cloud apps is your organization using? It could be 1,000, it could be 3,000, 5,000. And what are they? And then where are those cloud apps storing the data? Is it in the jurisdiction which is allowed? Like, is it in Canada or is it in some third country? Also, if the data is in the cloud, can it be downloaded to your personal computer? So that is also something which has to be, policies have to be around that. And the security of the data has to be considered, whether it is in the cloud or whether it is being stored on a personal device.
You know, one of the challenges, you know, depending on, I think, Colin, as you said, depending on the OEM, they may have, I know the German OEMs in particular have a very specific set of rules you have to follow and a set of encryption that's required. You know, if you're using a software as a service solution, AJ, as you describe, well, there may not be any encryption of that data. You may not have control over that, therefore. So how do you make sure you comply with that third party? And I know lots of organizations have turned on lots of cloud solutions in order to enable their people to continue working, whether that's, you know, cloud email, whether that's cloud document sharing, whether that's cloud design solutions. You know, you're going to need to understand, and I think the question is that the new normal? I think it probably will be, because people are used to video conferencing. I have one client I'm doing work on right now. You know, 8 weeks ago, we decided it did not make sense for the team to go out there. We didn't go onto the client site. We're going to travel. We're going to complete that project and start another phase of that project without ever actually going on site. And we're doing that because we have data sharing tools in place. But we had an agreement before we actually got into this about the data sharing and about the tool and about the level of encryption. So I think one of the conversations that folks are going to need to have with their people, and also with their, the tier 2, the tier 3, and so on, the supply chain and the OEM, is, if this is the new normal, are we all in agreement with the tools we're using? Are we all in agreement that the security is appropriate? Or if it's not good enough, is that acceptable? Because we've got to keep moving, because we still want to deliver, the new products over the summer. Or are we going to have to change? And what does that mean? And who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Looking into a crystal ball, John, like, is this the new normal? Are we going to see companies looking at corporate office spaces and saying, well, we think productivity is definitely up. I haven't read an article in the last 8 weeks about how productivity has somehow gone down. You know, what are you hearing, and are we seeing a trend towards remote working for some of us?
You know, I describe, I don't know if we're working, if we're being more productive. We have nothing else to do, so we're probably spending more time working. Our commute has disappeared. I mean, my commute involves rolling down the stairs, getting a tea, rolling into the basement instead of driving into downtown. So I have a lot more time to work. I'm actually probably working longer as well. And I think we have to work harder to communicate. We can't just walk around the corner and talk to someone. We've actually got to schedule time because we don't know, we can't see them. So it's hard to tell if they're available. So are we more productive? I think we're probably working harder and longer. But at the same time, do I really want to go, you know, do I want to get on a train with lots of other people who I don't know if they're well or not and go into downtown and take all that time and then go to a gym downtown? I'm not sure I want to. I'm not sure. Right? No, right? Do you,
I don't think anyone wants to do that.
I don't, and I don't know if I have to. I think that's, you know, we have an advantage. We may not have to. There are lots of other people who, on the other hand, do. And so I think we're going to have to balance off. There's going to be people who don't need to go into the office. And so I think the office of the future may be very different than the office of today. You know, I think the office of the future, instead of having a couple large offices, we may have a lot more smaller satellite offices that we come to, we meet, and then we go home. At least in my business, I think the idea of having the big showcase office in downtown, which a lot of organizations are moving to, I think they may move away from that to reduce the commute time and to allow people to work as and when they see fit.
Yeah.
You know,
same here.
broadening the conversation, you know, we could talk about, you know, the challenges of, you know, not having certain firewalls and restrictors in place when you work from home, and also the fact that you don't have the support system right across the hallway or in the office next to you to go and talk to if you may have received an email which could be a phishing email and you're not too sure. So, you know, the distance, the physical distance between you and that support network now is a phone call away or a video call away, which, you know, as easy as that sounds, isn't always so easy. So I'm sure cybercrime is kind of on the up. We know the Black Hat folks do look at certain kind of trends and they do see a weakness with people working from home. We've already heard about government checks and that scam coming in where, you know, you're getting calls or you're getting emails and please click this link to, you know, receive your check or to know more about your check from the government. Can you give us some examples of recent attacks and what are we seeing within the industry when it comes to cybercrime?
So we've already seen a couple. One of them we've seen is the urgent email to payroll to change bank account information. We've seen a number of cases of that where organizations have received an urgent email, appears to be from the actual person. It's not, to change their payroll account. The result is their bank account information was changed and they didn't get their pay, which not a good thing. We've seen that in a number of cases. We've also seen, I don't know who hasn't gotten a text saying that the money, the money from the government is awaiting. Please click on this to enter your bank account information to receive your money, or there's a delay in the money. And so we've seen the fraudsters preying on that in particular and going after organizations. I think, especially since I can't physically see the person and validate with the person, I can't walk. If I'm a payroll person and I'm working from home and I get a note saying someone has, Colin, your bank account information has changed and it looks like it's from Colin, the only way for me to check that is actually to call Colin up if I know Colin's number and confirm that is in fact Colin. But even then, it may not be Colin if the number that's attached to that email isn't correct. So I think organizations are going to have to, I think, rethink how they authenticate people, and validate, if someone says they want to change something, I think they're going to have to rethink that. And, the old user ID and password wasn't great before. In a completely digital world, which we're seeing, it's even less effective in the future.
So the attacks have changed in our new reality, or are they kind of still pretty much the same?
I think they've gotten more creative. And they're preying on people, on urgency of getting money, on urgency of being helpful, and so I don't think that has changed. I think they're and they're going to continue kind of pivoting to prey on that as we move forward, and as organizations look to spool things up, they're going to come back at us with something different. They'll come back with, hey, I'm a new employee, and I think you've got my wrong information. So I think they will continue. They'll continue being creative, and I think organizations are going to have to up their game to really make sure that they think through, well, how could somebody, scam us, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
AJ, with again, John and Dr. Mitra are all part of the Cybersecurity Committee. We've developed the CyberKit 1.0. We're already talking about 2.0, but we've also spoken over the past few days and weeks about doing assessments, free assessments. Like, what is the value of a document or a product like the CyberKit in our present situation?
So I think I've been a cybersecurity professional for 20 years. I think the CyberKit is a unique document because it gives you a holistic approach for a journey to become cyber secure. So it's not about one thing or the other. It tells you from what is your cybersecurity organization structure to the cyber security risk assessment, to the policies and procedures, to cybersecurity insurance, whether you have the correct insurance or not. And a very important part about related to cybercrime is awareness, cybersecurity awareness training. So the CyberKit also mentions that. So basically, it's a holistic document which gives you details on how to become cyber secure. And you were mentioning the free assessments. Well, those assessments for an organization are important. So that's basically they're looking at whether whatever is mentioned in the CyberKit, which is the holistic cybersecurity approach, whether that organization has any gaps from that perspective. And once they go through the CyberKit and once they go through the assessment, they would be in a good position to develop a journey, a path to become secure. And that could be a short-term journey, it could be medium-term, and it could be long-term. So I do feel that the APMA CyberKit for today's environment, for so many companies who are now moving to a work-from-home environment, it is a great guide for them.
A couple of thoughts, Colin. I have the CyberKit is specifically focused on auto parts manufacturers. Yeah. Other standards are not. So NIST Cybersecurity Framework or ISO are generic. This is focused specifically on auto parts, and I think that's valuable because the business is different and the data used is different. So I think it's quite useful. But we're also seeing clients asking, okay, the world has changed, the risks have changed. Can you tell us, what risks are different? And I think we've talked about some of them: the working from home, the remote access and authentication. But some risks have reduced, right? Okay, well, my office is locked up and almost nobody's in the office. So tailgating, which used to be a big worry, people coming into my building, well, there's nobody in my building now. So some risks have reduced. I need to worry less perhaps about my device, because my device is at my house, locked up behind my doors. So it's less likely someone's going to walk in and steal it. They're probably going to ransack the rest of my house. So I think the risks have changed. I think we're seeing clients ask, what's changed? What risks have gone up? What risks have gone down? And how should I flex? And I think that to me is the key thing. And AJ, you talked about this, is what is my roadmap in this new normal, and how is that different than what I've done before? Because maybe there's some things I need to spend time on, policy, governance, standard communication, and I need to spend less time on, perhaps the physical security of the building, because most people aren't coming in.
You know, we talked about this at the beginning, you know, when we did the introduction about, you know, staying resilient and, you know, leveraging new technologies. You know, I put it out to all three of you, you know, we know as a committee, we use the word change the culture because we know that the automotive parts manufacturers and the supply chain are not adapting to cybersecurity the way I think we'd all like them to, or as quick as they should. And so do we see this current period of COVID and maybe next week or the week after, this post-COVID era, being a time where companies begin to embrace cybersecurity more because it makes sense more, if that any of that makes sense?
I see some of the examples are, they are, obviously everyone is worried about the cybersecurity now more than before. But at the same time, I see examples of rushing into, you know, making policy or decisions. So for an organization, I think it's very important to have the balance where some of the acts have to be, you know, modifications have to be in place very rapidly, so to ensure the safe and you know, holistic work environment. But at the same time, I don't think we can anticipate every type of cybercrime that is going to happen to us, right? So I think that we are in a up and down and in a very kind of a stormy situation at this stage where there was always a bit of a back and forth between the attackers and hackers and the people that are, you know, creating policies, creating firewalls, programs, and all the technology. I only kind of feel like at this time there will be more turbulence of fights between the two, mostly because we are kind of being thrown at this new, we weren't given any heads up, right? We were just, at least in our organization, one day don't come anymore and just change everything to be online. And I think that in a lot of other maybe smaller companies, at least this rush into just coming up with plans the way as we go is in place. So again, to the point that AJ and John were raising, I think that we need to create the policy governance and, you know, create these frameworks for the industry, for the partners in not just in automotive, but in other sectors as well, to ensure that at least this initial phase of chaos we're going through it with more, you know, ease of mind, as I can say. So I think that yeah, the cybersecurity is definitely more important, but we got to be careful about the decisions that we make during this period.
Well, one of the things that we're starting to see is in the past, usability and ease of use and security were mutually exclusive, right? To improve security, reduce the usability of a system. But I think we're now starting to see that you can actually have strong security and make it easy. You know, think about, you know, instead of using a really long passcode on your phone, I can use my thumbprint, or I can use my iris scan. My daughter sits with her computer and she doesn't type in a passcode. It does a retina scan. So that's probably way more secure than any level of password, but it's also far easier. So I think what we're seeing organizations doing is they're finding ways of getting better security at the same time as they're going to get, you know, usability. I think, you know, AJ, you talked about the CASB solution. You can actually restrict what cloud solutions you use with that, have approved cloud solutions, link that into your authentication method, so you can it's the same user ID and password in the cloud solution as if you're connecting to your on-premise system. And the result then is if I shut that down, then your access is immediately removed, even if it's a cloud solution. So you actually have better security, only one password, which is a lot more easier for people to remember and use than, you know, the old, I've got umpteen different passwords, which I then go put onto a onto a yellow sticky on my desk.
You know,
Colin, I just want to comment with regard to your question on the automotive sector. So the automotive sector, I think, is on a journey where cyber is becoming more and more part of business as usual. And ISO 21434 is a good example of that, the standard which is in draft phase now and be coming out published by the end of the year, which talks about how to develop securely a connected and autonomous vehicle. So from a development phase to operation phase and maintenance and even disposal of the vehicle, how to secure the assets and especially data. So ISO 21434 and these other various standards which are coming out are actually driving the cybersecurity implementation and cybersecurity governance in the automotive sector.
Good to, thanks for that point. You know, I just put up the challenges of securing remote work, and I guess we didn't dig deeper into this earlier, but, you know, cloud versus servers, you know, what is the best practice now? And what is the best practice even for, let's say, 8 weeks ago? Is it, you know, because there are battle lines drawn between those that think servers versus cloud, like, you know, please allude and kind of, you know, try and answer that one. Is it cloud? Is that the more secure place, or is it a server at, say, HQ?
You know, to me, the difference between cloud and on-premise is, do you clearly understand what you're accountable for, right? If it's on-premise, you're responsible for everything. In cloud, you're responsible for some things, but do you understand what you're responsible for? And have you integrated that cloud solution into your overall security architecture, right? So as AJ talked about, is it an authorized cloud solution? You know, do you know what data you can place there, and do people understand that? Is it integrated with your logging and monitoring? I had one client who went and used a cloud email solution. They didn't want to spend the money to get the additional logging beyond 30 days. They got hit with an issue where senior executives had email accounts auto-forwarded to Gmail accounts. So people were able to read their email at leisure from a Gmail account. When they asked us to go and do an investigation, we looked and found, well, we can't really tell you when it started because you only kept the logs for 30 days. And so for want of, you know, $15,000 or $20,000, it cost them a lot of money because, you know, personally identifiable information and health information ended up being shared. So I think remote work can be, Colin, as secure, because some of these third parties probably have security teams that are bigger than your whole IT department or your engineering department. But it only works if you understand what you're accountable for and you've got the right controls in place and you've integrated into what your security is and you've communicated to your people what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do.
And which is a gap we've identified, which is our sector not understanding the value of security personnel, not the folks wearing black t-shirts, but somebody that understands IT and OT security. But as we look at the challenges of securing remote work, and I know none of you are insurance specialists, but you know, what are the legal and compliance issues, and even insurance? You know, I'm working from home on a design file for, say, a major global OEM, and something goes wrong. I get hacked. You know, does my company's insurance kind of cover me for working remotely?
So I think one of the first questions you got to ask is, did the OEM allow you to do that? Was that something they covered? We're starting to see the OEMs getting very prescriptive on where you can place documents and where you can put them. I think secondly, from an insurance is the last backstop, right? What did your policy say? Did you even have a policy on that? So if the OEM said you couldn't do it and you didn't have a policy on it, then I guess it's okay. Then the question becomes, well, does your insurance, and one of the challenges I've seen with a lot of cyber insurance is it's often designed not for the data you have. It was designed, in many cases, they're generic policies, often designed for personally identifiable information or credit card data, not, design data, operational technology information. So your insurance, you may not have coverage for that specific data. And I've seen some organizations get riders for that, but maybe there's no rider for that. Have you identified what is key data? And have you asked your insurance company, is it covered or not? Because you may find out, guess what? I'm not covered.
Yeah, I think the important part here is to identify who is the owner of the data and who is the custodian of the data, and whose insurance policy actually applies to that data. So if you are the owner and you have cyber governance policies which says that the custodian needs to secure that data, and then the data is hacked from the custodian, and the custodian could be a cloud app or it could be your own internal servers, then who becomes responsible for that insurance? So having those cyber governance policies which speak to insurance and which speak to the ownership of the data is very important here.
And again, a household could be a family of four, the $1 million family. It could be two individuals living together. It could be a group of 7 that have just decided to, move into a house. Authentication, who's logging in and who's accessing your data? Like, if I'm using a commercial device or a personal device, it's sitting there. Like, how are we securing, certain silos in the sector, in our sector, were developed. Swipe cards were required for you to access and enter certain zones. Those have all gone out. Colin could be the nicest person on the planet, but my wife's done some time for cyber. Let's hopefully she hasn't done some time for cyber. How do we secure and how do we know who's accessing your data?
Well, I don't know how many people have had, 6 months or a year ago, I don't know if you saw the BBC where interview where the guy was working from home and the kids came piling in and then the nanny came piling in and it was an absolute disaster, but it was really cute. And that's cute. But if you think about who's walking past your computer while you're working, and in the office, Mitra, as you said, we've got these anti-glare screens, we've got offices, we've got, we limit who has, we limit who comes into various parts of the building. Well, who do I limit when I'm sharing a place? What if your spouse works for the competitor? What if your kid works for the competitor or decides to take a photo of your screen and share it with their friends and go, look what daddy's working on. Ooh, it's the new 3 series. Oops.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's the challenge, I think, that organizations haven't necessarily thought through.
Yeah, even for us, for example, I'll go to my background, which is doing research. So some of the newer technologies, we actually have to put them off, pause the projects because the vendor that is selling us for example, those models, they've spent millions of R&D in developing those models. And even though they're not going to make any product out of that, but we use essentially their IP, their models to develop, technological wonders, consumer, electronics. So even that is, gone thrown off the door. But in all of this, I'm kind of worried. What worries me is the same as, where we have to download, a license agreement and we never read it and we just click and move on. What is kind of bothering me and makes me worried that all of these insurance policies, with regards to giving warning who owns what, most of us, none of us basically are going to read those insurance policies very carefully. So at the end, are we training people about those insurance policies, or we just follow the same approach as we've been doing about the license agreements? What are we going to do? And that is something that any company that is worried about the remote working has to consider, the impatience of even younger generation, that they just want to click and move on. So there are a lot of, even we can come up with the best policy, we can come up with the best insurance, which covers every loophole. but does the user really understand what they're doing or not? And that kind of worries me.
Yeah, I think organizations need to understand what we call it crown jewels.
Mhm.
And, you know, as we've talked about, where are the crown jewels and who has access to the crown jewels? And then what do I do in the event there's an issue with the crown jewels? So a crown jewel may not be your crown jewel. It may in fact be your customer's crown jewel. Like Mitra, I think about all the, it's not just the design, but it's also the data you get that gets shared with you.
Yeah.
How is that data shared? Because that data in effect is IP. It's somebody else's data. And if someone walks by your desk and took a photo of that and then posted that, who's liable?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you? Is that the university? Is that the OEM? Like, who's liable for that? And I think organizations are going to have to think that through, and spend a fair amount of time thinking about, if this is the new normal, how are we going to protect both the data but also protect our people, right? If I'm a new employee and I come in and the company says, we need you to work from home, my first question is, okay, well, are you going to give me a computer? We don't want you to use your own. Hold on a minute. You want me to work on your data on my computer. Hold on a minute. How's that going to work? How am I going to protect myself as an employee if something were to happen? So I think our people we've got to help protect our people, because stuff's going to happen, but we've also got to protect the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of continue the conversation, but from the other aspect, which is, yes, I'm working from home. I'm probably more productive than I ever was. Maybe one of the reasons I'm saying that is because my ISP and my internet speed is so slow that I feel like I'm sitting at my computer a lot longer. What are the implications on the individual or on the company? Who pays? If we need to have more bandwidth, do I pay? Does the company pay? Should I just be happy I have a job and just shut up?
I think a lot of companies are expecting us to be just happy that we are blessed with a job. I actually don't have an answer for that. As an employee, been asking that question, and I've been told to wait. So I would expect, the companies to come up with policies that is fair to me. So because I'm using a lot of my, personal devices at this time. Because there was really no time for, a research lab to be we weren't given any heads up again. We were just, one day, the university president said off, no one comes to campus. And then there were occasions that we moved between house and, went and picked up a few documents and brought it. But practically, even for the larger companies, except those that have their employees on authorized company laptops or services, the data, the connection to the data was never ever considered a security risk for those companies. That you can easily hack into the Wi-Fi of a house if it's not well protected. So those issues, I don't think anyone at this time has any answer or has had the time to even think about it, most of, I should say. People are just starting, to go through this period of chaotic phase. But I do hope that they come up with a policy and pay some of my connectivity, charges. I really need that. Especially even though we are in, we have some services, but sometimes I see the frustration of some of my colleagues that are, joking that if they were using a pigeon, it would reach the sender much faster than you sending an email. So I think that this patchy internet connections all over the country is something that probably needs to get addressed, but that's not easy because you need infrastructure, you need to invest, and so on and so forth. So, longest story short, I hope that they pay, but I don't think that that happens anytime soon.
I'm just keeping one eye on the clock as well, gentlemen and ladies. We are about 6 minutes to go, so I will move into the key takeaways, but if anybody just wanted to finish off on that question.
I just wanted to say that, yes, your internet link and your systems is one thing, but there are other related issues like how do you get support? You alluded to that earlier, that it's maybe a phone call away, but it's not so easy. So is there, would there be a move towards just having local support available and companies outsourcing that to various entities? So there are other challenges here for remote work which we need to address.
Thank you. So key takeaways, as John alluded to earlier, we did get together yesterday and we all discussed things. And so, you know, how to future-proof internal systems, deal with increased vulnerabilities, and to keep cyber ecosystems healthy in a post-COVID-19 world. We don't know how long we have, if this is phase one of multiple phases of this COVID-19, but you know, those were the three takeaways. Feel free to read them and to maybe just add a few words to them, panelists.
I just wanted to say that this is the time that we keep asking everyone to, maintain a high hygiene and wash their hands and so on. And I think it's time also for cyber hygiene policies to actually take place. And we have a long time to go, but cyber hygiene is the new word, new combinational word that I really like to repeat. There should be some policies with that.
That's a great point, Dr. Mitra.
I think, you know, revisiting is this, if this is the new normal, what does that mean? What does that mean for your policies and standards and your processes? What does that mean in terms of expectations on your people? What does that mean, and what does that mean in terms of how you will work with the OEMs and your third parties, and getting agreement on that? You now have an opportunity, you know, to do things in, you know, maybe it's a little quicker than the pigeon. I hope it is, but there's some days I wonder as things get stuck in my outbox. But I think rethink how we're going to do things in very much a digital world. It's been very effective for some people, but it may not be effective for everyone. And so how do you make it as effective as possible for as many people as possible in this new world?
I believe this is an opportunity for innovation. So with all the new transformation happening and a number of people going to work from home, this is an opportunity to come up with new practices, new initiatives, and new ways for the corporate world to work. There are a number of good technologies out there, but more than that, what you need is, as John alluded to it, a strategy, a long-term strategy, and to ensure that you have all these key takeaways incorporated into it, but you look even further and see how you can survive and even thrive in this new world.
You know, we in our last kind of conversation webinar on cybersecurity, we had our friends from Netscope on who were talking about their secure VPNs as opposed to an individual being able to access the whole server. You're only able to access specific areas of this. AJ, you were on the call earlier when we talked about Industry 4.0 with Toyota and Porsche, and the word innovation was kicked around, and I think we're all alluding to this. I think there are some great opportunities for the auto sector to really begin to embrace cybersecurity because their feet are put to the fire. You know, remote working means you better make sure all of your information is secure. You better make sure that data and the value of that data is being secured properly, and also authentication. You know, what practices and best practices in your governance policies and procedures do you need to have in place to make sure everybody gets this? So, you know, any final takeaways before we sign off?
Enjoy your basement.
Good luck, everyone.
Have a great one. Thank you very much, John Heaton, AJ Khan, and Dr. Mitra Mirhassani. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.